Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Matthew López. I am going to be running this show today. Today we're here to talk with the creators and the stars of the program It's a Sin, which if maybe have been living under a rock for the last several months, it's a new series on HBO Max, also came from Channel 4 in the UK, about the AIDS epidemic in London in the 80s and the early 90s. It's Russell Davies' latest. It is incredible. It is filled with love. It is filled with humor. It's filled with sex. It's filled with sadness and longing and regret. It's filled with everything that you want from a TV program. And I'm so excited to be here to talk with you all about it, to talk with them about it. First thing I want to do is bring in Kevin Robert Frost. He is the amfAR CEO, and he and I are going to talk for a little bit before we bring everybody in. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Matthew, I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Listen, I realize that we only have an hour, and I could probably spend that much time just using adjectives. So instead, I think we should talk together. Can you just briefly explain for everybody how you got involved in AIDS activism and then your involvement with amfAR, and when did that start?
Sure. I mean, I grew up in the 1980s, and I was living in Texas at the time, actually. I went to the University of Texas. And, we would hear a little bit about what was going on in New York. It seemed kind of distant at the time. But then in the late 1980s, I saw a production of The Normal Heart when I was still living in Texas. And it completely changed my life. And I realized that I was a gay man. I didn't have HIV, but I knew I wasn't an innocent bystander either. And so not long after that, I moved to New York City, and quite by coincidence, I was working in Tower Records in the East Village in the classical music section. One night, very late at night, I met Larry Kramer. He came in, and we had this rather interesting conversation. And Larry challenged me in terms of what I was doing, because I told him I loved The Normal. I told him I'd seen The Normal Heart. I loved it. And his response was, "Oh, really? What the fuck are you doing about it?" Which kind of was shocking for a kid from the South. But nonetheless, I think he immediately saw what was going through my mind. And he said, "So, a bunch of us, we meet on Monday nights over at the Gay and Lesbian Center. You should come over and join us." And the next Monday night, I became a member of ACT UP. That was it. Wow. Yeah. And then I actually worked right after that. I went in to do research work at NYU in the city. And it was about 1994 when the head of research at amfAR recruited me to come to amfAR. And that was the beginning of my work there.
It's incredible. Your entire life has been devoted to this. It's amazing that this has created a generation of people for whom that is true. Unlike say cancer or other illnesses, this is really has always been a community response, and that you're a living embodiment of that. Speaking of community responses, we have all been sort of in our own communities globally, and then down to sort of the micro level, dealing in this past year with COVID, and wondering if you had any thoughts about what the impact of this latest pandemic has had on our thinking about HIV. Has it brought our thinking about HIV into the forefront, or has it actually done the opposite and pushed it out of people's minds because we are dealing with this other virus right now?
Yeah, I think I think for those of us who lived through the worst of the AIDS epidemic all those decades ago, it was very difficult to watch what has happened over the last year, because there's been a powerful sense of déjà vu, but also a sense of, wow, we really didn't learn those lessons from the 80s. Because particularly here in America, there's no question that COVID is a disease that disparately affects different communities. And it is the poor, it is the marginalized, it is communities of color that have been most hard hit by the pandemic, by the COVID pandemic. And I think for those of us who understood that AIDS wreaked havoc in a similar way, particularly on gay men of color, in different communities, it's been hard to watch. It's been hard to watch the political failures, particularly, because I thought maybe the lessons had been learned, but clearly they hadn't. Mm-hmm. I think that it's been a mixed message, to be honest. I think it's interesting to see that the researchers and scientists at the front lines of work against COVID are the same researchers who have been doing HIV work for 30 years. And in fact, the reason that we have COVID vaccines today is because of the scientific architecture, the research architecture that we built to do HIV/AIDS research. There's a direct line between the two. So I'm incredibly proud of that fact, but at the same time recognize that at least over the last 12 months, some of the AIDS work has been pushed into the background. And I think as we start to emerge from the COVID pandemic, we have to ramp up our work in AIDS research again, because some of the momentum has been lost.
I want to throw a curveball question at you. It just occurred to me that if anyone is in a position to have an opinion about it or know about it, do you know about, I read several weeks ago that Moderna believes that from what they've learned developing the vaccine for COVID, that they can now apply that to an HIV vaccine. Is there a world in which you think that just as HIV has influenced how we treat and respond to COVID, once COVID is dealt with in terms of vaccinations, can that in turn be turned back onto HIV?
There's certainly lessons to be learned. I don't deny that. Moderna's mRNA technology, which is the basis of their COVID vaccine, was actually being applied towards an HIV vaccine before COVID ever came along. So Moderna already had the idea that this technology could be revolutionary, and so they were developing an HIV vaccine. There's also a tremendous amount of work going on in molecular biology around things like gene editing, right? That really are at the forefront of trying to get to a cure for HIV. And as we all know, there have been a couple of cures already. I believe a cure is not only possible, but it's possible in our lifetime if we can ramp that architecture back up again. And that's really where we stand today, is at this precipice of, okay, we've spent a year addressing the COVID pandemic. It's now time to get back to work on some of these other problems. And I think if we do, and we invest the right amount of resources, we'll be surprised at how much progress we can make.
You yourself mentioned that you moved to New York during the height of the AIDS epidemic. What was it like for you watching It's a Sin for the first time with those memories still in your mind?
Well, to be honest, I was shattered by it when I first watched it. It was really very difficult for me to watch because I'm the same age as Richie. I graduated from high school in 1981. I went to college in the fall of 1981. And as the events in It's a Sin were unfolding, it was like looking back at a scrapbook of my own life. I knew Richie, right? I knew Jill. I knew Colin. These were people that were part of my lived experience in the AIDS epidemic. And because I was in my 20s and 30s as the epidemic sort of rolled out, it was the most intense intellectually, emotionally. It was so intense personally that I don't often revisit it. You know, I lived through The Normal Heart and through Angels in America and An Early Frost on American television, all those things. And I don't often, there aren't too many AIDS works that are written, your play aside, that are written more contemporarily that look back at the AIDS epidemic. And so when I have done it, it's not often a journey I look forward to because it's devastating. And for me, It's a Sin was really very emotionally difficult. But at the same time, a story that I want people to see. I want my kids to see it. You know, I have 2 little boys. And I want people today, particularly young people, to see it and understand what our generation went through and how we got to where we are today.
Beautifully put. Thank you. I want to now bring in the creators and the producers of It's a Sin, Russell T Davies and Nicholas Schindler. If they're in the waiting room, they're going to
Hello.
Well, hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, both of you. Are you both in London?
Manchester in the north.
Manchester. Oh,
Yeah.
Across the Atlantic Sea. It's a hair reference for anybody who gets it. It's so nice to see you both. Listen, I mean, I'm sure you're probably both. You could write this for me myself, and you could also never get tired of hearing it. Your show just absolutely tore me apart and put me back together. It really just it is an incredibly hopeful piece of writing and creation, and it's hard to do when you're writing something about that period. And I love that the show never ever loses its sense of humanity, its sense of humor, and in that, the pain of it just comes the great humanity of the piece. Russell, I have some questions for you.
Thank you. Just say thank you for that. It's like thank you for saying. And Kevin, I really appreciate what you're saying about how tough it was as well. I completely get that. It's like, and thank you for being so honest. Bless you. And,
yeah. So Russell, you've written a great deal on gay themes in your past work, and but not so much directly on the topic of HIV/AIDS as you have done in It's a Sin. Why now? Why this point in your life, this point in your career? What compelled you at this time to do this?
Well, it's like you're never actually in control of your career. My whole career got sidelined for 10 years by Doctor Who. That's why I went off to space for a long time. And it wasn't for that, we'd be doing this 10 years earlier. And it's a bit of a myth, actually. It's like I did my first HIV story in 1993 or 4 with a program called Children's Ward that confronted that head on. And actually, it's there in Queer as Folk. People say Queer as Folk isn't about HIV. It so is, but by its absence. And it's there in the dialogue. It's there in every single reference. It's there every charity night they go to. It's there all the time. It's just that was 1998. And that was time to say, we are not defined by a virus. We are far more than a virus. And oh my God, do you remember that press launch, Nicola? That was ferocious, wasn't it? It was like
the response was
yeah.
wanted more.
Yes, there was more what? More
like conscious mention of HIV/AIDS at the time.
Well, it's fascinating because literally it was a fury in the room. 250 journalists. I mean, you don't get 250 journalists at press launches. They turned up to cause trouble, and you know, with and wildly furious as well. And the fascinating thing was, these are journalists that go to press launches every single day, and they don't sit there when straight characters are having sex, saying, where's the safe sex mission? Where are the condoms? Which is completely invalidates their whole point. It's like, you know, it was only being seen as a gay issue, only being seen as a queer issue, which justified everything I'd done with it. And then I did a series called Cucumber 2015, so I think is still available over there. Was that on Logo? I think the Logo channel. Anyway, and that's very much about, you know, a middle-aged man carrying all regrets of his lifetime and all the things he wished he'd done, and with physical embarrassment about his life and a lack of intimacy. And he psychologically tests all that back to the 80s, and he talks about the AIDS adverts that were on telly. And I could go on listing stuff. I'll be here forever.
But it's so unique in your in the history of your creation, in that you go back in time to an event from your youth. And you from the distance of almost of 30 years. And so why this particular time to go back and wrestle only with that question? Yes, you're right. It'll come up in other work, but this is only addressed to that question.
It was simply next, to be honest. I literally finished the last line of Cucumber, and I sat at this desk, at this chair, and I went, right. And the last line of Cucumber is Henry facing up to his past. And I probably sent you an email, Nicola. Or what did I do? Did I send you an email saying, right now?
Yeah, you're ready. Yeah.
Yes, this was the next progression. Maybe I needed to get this far away from it, or this long to think about it. I don't know. It's like literally I would have done it sooner if other things hadn't gotten in the way. In like 2018, someone asked me to write the Jeremy Thorpe story, so I was like, right, I did that there, and then so that delayed it for a year. It's kind of beyond your control, but nonetheless, yes. The bigger point is I waited a long time to get this. I'm kind of glad. I'm glad I did. I'm proud of what I've written, and maybe that was. I trust myself in the end. I think that's the main thing about being a writer. It's like you can get all the notes and all the advice and all the career advice and all the pushes you want. In the end, I just trust myself, and I trusted myself to get here, and I did.
Yeah. What now? So what you could not have anticipated is maybe in some strange way waiting for the right moment and waiting for inspiration to strike and waiting for to have the freedom in your schedule to do it, and then it premieres in the middle of COVID, which is a coincidence, but we have spent this last year reading pieces where people are trying to find parallels, and I'm not really interested in that question. What I am interested in knowing is do you think there isn't any way that this experience that we've been living through for the last year made this a particularly right time for people to be receptive to this story?
I wonder. I mean, we thought the opposite. At Christmas, we were like going, "Oh my God, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and here we are launching a drama about a virus." I thought it was the death knell. I just thought we were going to, because the news is full of it all day long. The chat shows are full of it. Daytime television's full. Our conversations are full of it. We can't see our families because of it, and so I kind of thought, "Oh my God, now we've got a virus drama." So this is all. Its success has been an enormous surprise. Maybe it has kind of weaponized us or made us more diligent or more interested in it, full stop. It's really hard to say because we'll never know what a version would have been like not going out in this time. But and great things, as Kevin was saying, it's amazing to see governments making the same mistake again and again and again, and some great links are being made, some terrible links being made. A Tory politician yesterday praised our Prime Minister for shaking hands with people without gloves and masks, like Princess Diana did with the HIV virus, in the clumsiest, stupidest remark. I mean, whenever HIV and AIDS comes along, you can guarantee a politician will just come and put their foot in it and say something stupid. If Princess Diana was doing the same thing that Boris Johnson was doing, she was all about education. He was all about getting votes. Anyway. So it's like, there it is, just being used as fodder yet again. Nonetheless, fascinating times. And yeah.
One of the reactions that is incredible to this show is that I was reading about is that in response to it in the UK, HIV testing rates have skyrocketed. That in response to seeing that educate. Can you talk about that? I mean, that must have been unexpected. Are you surprised by that, or how did you react?
Absolutely astonished by that, because actually the thing we worried about in making the show, because it's set entirely from 1981 to 1991, is that there was no way within the drama to turn to camera and say, "It's all right now. You don't need to worry now in 2020. You don't need to worry. There's medication now. Things changed in 96. There's help, there's support, etc., etc." There was no way in the program we could have said that. So we spent a long time worrying about that, thinking, how do we get that message across? And then I think you forget that everyone has the biggest search engine in the world in their hands now. Everything that used to be kind of supplementary material on television, saying, "Here's a documentary about the history of HIV," is now right there in your hands. So everything we worried about didn't happen, actually, and everyone did kind of politicize themselves. Everyone went and educated themselves, and it was a fourfold increase in tests, and they were
and they ran out of tests.
They ran out of home testing kits
for the first time ever. Yes, and it felt like it was the younger generation that were becoming aware and were educating themselves and were then going out and getting tested. It felt like they had not heard this story before and they didn't know what had happened during the 80s. So the shock of it to them, kind of pushed them towards testing.
Well, I saw a post that Ollie had on Instagram, and he was reporting about very young people not even knowing about this history, which, of course, to anybody north of 30, that just feels like that's insane. And yet, if you don't have access, you don't have knowledge. And I think that is one of the things you're giving. Now, listen, Russell, I have to ask you this question, and if there's anybody who knows anything about HIV narratives not completely translating over from the UK to the US, it's me. There has been a bit of criticism of the show from AIDS activists in the United States, in particular from Peter Staley, who is a very renowned and beloved and important AIDS activist in the United States, around the question of shame on the show. I'm sure you've heard about it, and it's come up here. Can you just tell us what in your own personal experience informed the writing of those scenes, in particular with Richie? I think a lot of the things that people pointed out in the United States is the scene in which Richie talks about knowing that he had HIV and having sex anyway. There's an age-old conversation in the gay community about that. It goes back to Larry Kramer, really. Can you talk about what, from your own experiences, led you to write about shame and using shame as a kind of a diagnosis for this, as a social diagnosis for the epidemic? And what has been or what is your reaction to that criticism?
Sure. I mean, it's completely fine because it's like I don't expect everyone to think the same thing. What I really gets on my nerves is when a queer community is all supposed to react in the same way to everything, as though we're all going to say, "Oh, that's great," "Oh, that's bad." That's because it's a massive, complicated subject, and there's an awful lot of fury and anger still about our mistreatment over the years, and the good work that has been done. So, of course, there's going to be all sorts of different reactions, and I knew that full well in walking right in there and creating which. And I think because of those reactions, and I know there's some reactions, I can anticipate those reactions. I think the anticipation of those reactions has prevented the creation of characters like Richie, who certainly exist and who's, I'm not going to say what he says is verbatim, but it might as well be verbatim. I knew those men, I knew their feelings, I knew their thoughts. Sometimes I think perhaps modern thinking on HIV is echoing backwards through time and saying we shouldn't feel like that for something that's set in 1987 or something. I think some of that happens. That's fair enough because the attitudes that are being won over now are kind of quite hard won, and then that's good to it. It's like, yes, there'll always be different reactions. In the end, I got this reaction. Look, I got this. There's a reaction I like, which is that someone wrote to me and said, "We're given the extremely rare and rather terrifying gift of judgment, a glimpse of judgment with compassion and without moralism. It's a sin you seem to have achieved the hardest thing, namely to tell the truth." And that's from Tony Kushner. So I'll take that. I'm right about that.
There you go. Well, I mean, I have no follow-up.
I know.
Can I just say, though, the thing about working on Russell's writing is he doesn't judge his characters. So characters can make mistakes, can make decisions that not everyone would want, but they're not judged for that. And I think it's important to put those people on screen.
Well, Nicola, that's a great. I have a question for you about your collaboration with him, and you've worked together for quite a while on different projects. How does this one for you? How was it different? How did it feel different doing it, and how's it felt different sort of sharing it with the world?
Well, each one feels different because Russell creates a world, and what I had to do is make sure that world ends up on screen in the same way that he's put it on the page. So everything always feels different. But equally, Russell's got a voice and a tone that I know needs a certain kind of actor that can understand it, the right director who will empathise with those characters and push the story just a little bit further. It's all about pace with Russell. I think when I got the script, I realised how extraordinary it was from the first reading of every single episode. I was the first audience who was crying on the phone to Russell every single time. So I knew how emotionally powerful it was, and I knew how lucky we were to be working on it and that we had to get it absolutely right. So being really aware of the fact I had to be as good as the script, or everyone has to be as good as the script, is quite tough, but really challenging.
Can you talk a bit about the fact that you had a cast full of actors who weren't even alive when this was happening? Nicola, did you find you had to sort of start a little a primer school for them? Did you send them reading lists? What was that like?
So you know what? You're going to meet them soon. They're all so fantastic in their own right and so clever. They knew exactly what they needed to learn, and they knew what they didn't need to know as well, so they could be as their characters were at that time. They're all so phenomenal, and they bought into the whole story and the whole backstory. They've learned, they've taught themselves. We didn't have to do anything. We just made sure that the material was there when they needed it.
One last question for you, Nicola, before we bring the cast in. What did you learn from doing this?
Oh, I learned so much because I had seen dramas before about AIDS and HIV in the UK where it was always a subplot. It was always about victims, and it was always very, very sad. And what Russell kind of said from the very beginning is, we make these human beings first, and we understand who they are, and we see their joy, and we see they were just young kids, and then we bring in what happened to them. And I think to have that put in front of me was just extraordinary.
Before I introduce you to the members of the cast, here's a brief taste of It's a Sin.
So, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
What do you want to be doing?
What's the plan?
I just want to be happy. I want to learn everything.
I'll be stinking rich.
He's going to London.
London.
I'm getting out of here. I'll be staying at 23 Piss Off Avenue, London, W. Fuck. The history of the men like us have always been hidden away in secret. But then there's the real world.
There's a million pubs and things. I love it here. I came to London and I thought, great, I can be gay.
We're going to have a party every night.
Morning. Morning.
Have you seen this?
He said, she said, they said. Always saying something.
They think it's this virus, AIDS. There are boys dying all over the world from sex.
Don't be ridiculous. That would be all over the news.
The government knows all about it, and they're keeping it quiet.
Do you think there's an illness that only kills gay men? The whole thing is a pack of lies.
You don't get better from AIDS, do you?
I don't think anyone knows.
AIDS is all we ever hear.
Don't you ever think you should stop?
Stop what?
Sex.
Have you been tested for HIV?
Could get anyone. What's going to stop it spreading?
This disease is terrifying. We're here to go guns blazing, together.
I've got some news for you. We're gonna live.
Well, speaking of Just Young Kids, let's meet our Just Young Kids. I want to bring in now the cast of It's a Sin. We're bringing in Ollie Alexander, Nathaniel Curtis, Omari Douglas, Keely Hawes, Callum Scott Howells, and Lydia West is joining this conversation. Look at this. This murder row here.
You couldn't afford this lineup now.
Oh my God. It's first of all, I mean, I feel like I'm going to be looking at these little boxes on maybe on Emmy night when you know, they always have all the little nominees on the screen. Listen, you're all just wonderful, and you know, one of the. Look, I mean, it's true. Like, you know, you can when you have a young cast who, you know, you're not babies, but when you have a cast of people who are not, who don't have a lived experience of exactly what they're doing and have to bring to it their imaginations, their compassion, their intellect, it is always a fascinating thing to watch. And what is amazing about this thing is I never ever saw a group of contemporary actors pretending to be in a time machine, going back and recreating this thing. I just saw the people. There, and it's a testament to the work that you did. It's a testament to your director, and mostly it's a testament to who you all are as actors. I mean, we could go on for 3 hours about how individually astonishing. But I do want to go individually. Actually, I want to start with a question for Ollie. You have an arc in this show that is, I mean, pretty much every actor's dream. I mean, you really just, it's like, you know, from starter to pudding, it's just the works, you know? And can you talk a little bit about how you prepared for Richie's journey, how you, and how the process of not just preparing for it, but then actually having to do it over the course of the filming of the series, how did that impact you? How did you keep together? How did you do it, and how did you keep from falling apart? Or did you fall apart?
Well, you're absolutely right. When I read the script, I just couldn't believe what a great role this was. You know, it was such a gift for an actor. But I think as a gay man myself, I just instantly connected with all these different elements of the story, but to Richie's character as well, especially the fact that Richie's always kind of hiding something, like from himself or from the people around him, from his family, because he's not able to be fully himself, and he has such big dreams that he wants to achieve, and he's good at kind of like getting on a stage and putting jazz hands on stuff, and like I really just related to that so instantly. And the story really is, I suppose, like it was this amazing opportunity to engage with an area in history that my understanding and knowledge of is pretty patchy, you know, so I know little bits here and there, and then getting the opportunity to really engage with this, which I feel so connected to as a gay person, you know, it was such a gift as well. And I keep a diary. I've kept a diary since I was a kid. And after I met Russell and I read the script, I was just writing in my diary, you know, like, what if I had lived like Richie, you know, what if I had been Richie at this time, you know, and how would I have felt? And it was a real just like personal journey for me, like hugely, because all the themes in the show, I think everyone who watches relates to, but as a queer person, I just, like, and Richie's story with his mom, like, I just really, all of it is just never not going to be very touching at heart. It's just like, it really touched me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's an incredible performance, and you really do feel the totality of a life in it. It's absolutely beautiful. Lydia, I have a question for you, really, which is just, I did not know watching it until we started preparing for this conversation. I did know that there was a Jill who lived in the Pink Palace, upon whom your character is based, and what I didn't know was that she played your mom in the series. That I did not know.
Yeah.
That must have felt like a particular gift for you as an actor. Can you talk about what was like meeting her for the first time, and did you rely on her for any perspective, advice? Did you observe her, or did you just simply allow her to be your creation and allow her to on set be your mom?
Yeah, so I was given advice from Russell not to kind of try and create anything of Jill based on real life Jill, and just being given that freedom from day one from Russell just made me like, because I already felt kind of a huge amount of responsibility playing someone so close to Russell and someone who's so special and so dear to this story. So just kind of having that freedom to just play Jill kind of as myself was amazing. But then what I gained from Jill, and the first time I met her at the read-through, I couldn't really look at her after we'd all finished. We met outside, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's you. And being on set with her, she would just kind of tell us all these stories and anecdotes of the time, and what life was like in the Pink Palace, what life was like in the 80s, and it was just amazing to have someone so close. And the amazing thing about the show is that it always felt that someone was available. Russell was always available to ask any questions to Peter, our director. You always felt very supported, but having Jill on set with you was just amazing. And I just pick her brain, and then we'd kind of go into takes, and I just imagine what it was like for her, and also her being there now filming this, and me playing her daughter who's also based on her. It was all just kind of this inception. And it felt really, really special, and I felt completely creatively free, but I gained a huge amount of inspiration from her, that I think helped me to play Jill as I did.
I mean, listen, this is going to be a lot of me just telling you how awesome you are and just how remarkable this show is. But you really, again, it's just this gorgeous arc of you there's not a care in the world, you just want to get into the show, and then now you're set for life. It's never going to close, and no problems whatsoever, and then problems hit you, and it's a really great. To me, it felt like a really great story about what allyship looks like, and which has always been the strength, the backing up the queer community is our allies, and the way. Oh, yeah, you're great. I love you. It's amazing performance. And, I'm going to shut up now.
Thank you.
Callum, where are you on my screen? Callum Scott Howells, how are you?
Good. Very good. How are you?
It's good to see you. One of the plot lines that you have is you're sent to New York, and Jill asked you to bring back any information on HIV that you can from New York. This, of course, this assumes that it was really hard to get information at the time in the UK, and now you wouldn't know that because you weren't alive back then. But my question for you is, how exactly did working on this series impact your understanding of that time? Were you like Colin, having to go and sort of seek out information that you didn't feel was available to you, or that you yourself perhaps did not sort of seek out until then? What was your education like working on this?
Well, I guess like it was nothing like Colin's, I guess, in the sense that I had like iPlayer and Google and Netflix and all these things to be able to watch like documentaries or any shows or videos that I need to watch, and then even books, like you got Audible and all the. I'm just advertising all these outlets. but basically, I had all that stuff which was available to the press. So I guess for Colin and for Jill and everyone, and that scene where Jill says to Colin, like, I need you to go look for stuff, and there was a line originally in the show where Jill says it's because all I'm reading is a lot of the same. Like it's all just the same. It's the same paragraphs in all the outlets, and so that's why Colin then went on his escapades in New York, and then got up to all the stuff he did.
Yeah, when one of the things that didn't occur to me when I was working on The Inheritance is that I would cast people who were so young that they don't remember, or they weren't around then, and I would see I'd see the guys showing up, these young gay men showing up for work, and they would be reading the books that I read in college, or I read when they came out. And it's been this amazing thing to watch a transference of knowledge, transference of experience from one generation to another. And I think, that to watch you own that as a character, watch you own all of you own that as actors, it's just a beautiful thing. Keely Hawes. We've got Keely. Hello, get a sip of water. Now, you have what is arguably the latest breaking sort of like development as a character in the show. I did not see that final episode coming at all. You're a tornado up on that screen. In particular, that I'm thinking about that scene in the hospital corridor where it's this long Steadicam shot that is just, you watch it. I watched it first, just not able to breathe, and then I had to rewind it after the episode to watch it again, just to watch when did they cut? Oh my God, this is a long scene for you. How can you talk about those scenes in the hospital? The entire episode is breathtaking, and you're just you're so wonderful in it, but there is a ferocity and almost a feral quality to her in those scenes. Can you just talk about that?
There is. One of the hardest parts was learning those. I think it was 15 pages, because as you say, just reading it. As Nicola said, getting through an episode, reading an episode is. It was just exhausting, and then reading it with my husband, and both of us just crying and crying and crying. So that was a huge achievement before we even actually got there, and of course it was incredibly difficult and emotionally draining for everyone. Of course it was, but as an actor, to be gifted a scene like that, every element is just, not only is the writing is just exquisite, but shooting that scene, the cast and the crew working together sort of as one, it's like it's sort of more like doing a play, and everyone from action to cut to the moment when you cut, everyone is relying on everyone else, and it was just a wonderful thing to get through those takes. We had plenty of time we were given plenty of time to do it. But when we did get through one of those takes, the feeling of sort of, euphoria, and that we had all done it together. And yes, it's Valerie, stomping up and down and clip, and we are with her and following her on her journey. But actually, there's everyone. It probably was much worse for our wonderful nurse who was down at one end with one line. Having me coming towards her, the whole, all of the crew, lovely down on his dolly, the boom up running, everyone just trying to make this work and bring their best game. And we're heading towards her, and she's got one line, and she has to do the work. And so, actually, it was a huge honour. And I think a great testament to the cast and to everybody in it, that none of these wonderful actors were dwelling on it. It was about getting it done and about doing it to the best of all of our abilities and about being there for each other. I really think that's what makes that such a. It is a brilliant scene, and then you end it by getting told off by the great Ruth Sheen. That's what more could you ask? That's extraordinary. So yeah, it was difficult. everyone, but it felt like a huge achievement, and to tell that part of the story, and to go to those places as an actor is a real gift. And I would have been mad not to have enjoyed it in a weird way, but I did.
Yeah, extraordinary. Amari, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
So in preparing for this, I read that you had watched Claire Lowry's documentary Beyond. Preparing for this, which is about, for those that don't know, it's about being Black and queer in London in the club scenes in the 70s and the 80s. And that was a significant part of your research for the part. Now, presenting this in the 21st century, decades later, can you talk about what it was like for you telling this particular story as a young queer Black man living in the UK today?
Wow. Well, I guess the honor is just sort of there. It's just sort of presented to you as soon as you sort of like are left with the duty of sort of being able to tell the story. So it was always going to be there. But it's strange because, like, in terms of my awareness of sort of HIV/AIDS at all, it was always kind of been through the prism of something that was like maybe a little bit far away from me. Like, I mean, the first thing that I remember knowing about HIV/AIDS really was Rent, because my music teacher at secondary school, he was a musical director on one of the productions in London towards the end of the 90s. So he was always really proud of it. And he always put it in front of us, and like, what choir hasn't sung Seasons of Love? So it was just sort of like, everyone knows that show. But like, even in Rent, like, obviously it's about AIDS, but you kind of hear about AZT. But to me, I was sort of like, oh, what's that? So it's sort of, there's references made, but you can't really kind of like delve into it. So, and then, once I knew that I was doing this, I was sort of just like, this is the moment where we really can dive in. And obviously, seeing documentaries like Claire's, and I got to meet some of those people like Les Child and Roy Brown and Andy Polaris, and like, these were all huge, like trailblazers, and they did so much kind of on the scene. And I think all it took really was for me to just kind of see them, and for it to just kind of like click that they were there. And I guess it's the visibility, isn't it? And just sort of like having that there presented to you, it just kind of lands with you. And then it's just sort of like solidified everything for me. And then it just means that you can sort of like fly away with it. And then it does feel like that you are honoring that part of the community, and sort of in the response to it. Actually, an activist called Mark Thompson said to me a few weeks ago, he said, do you know the singer David McColmont? And I was like, yes, I know David McColmont. And he was in the band McColmont and Butler. And he was like, I know David. And he was like, we sat together, and he said, we were watching the show, and he was like, David said, was that almost like me? And David said that Roscoe was very much sort of, he felt like that it was reminiscent of him, just sort of like the way that he was carrying himself through the 80s and kind of like into the early 90s. So I was just like, whoa, that's amazing. So for someone to sort of have gone through it and to see that and to sort of recognize a little bit of themselves in it is sort of just like completely amazing to me. So I'm just sort of really wowed by that.
No, I really loved the scene near the end with your father, and the question of forgiveness, and I know that, like, as a person of color, I never want to be asked to represent the community that I come from, but then in the same token, I also want to do right by the community that I represent. Yeah. And it's that tenuous balance that you always have, and that you have to hold. And it really comes down to, I want to do it on my terms. Thank you very much. Not on your terms. And from what I could see, and from what I've read about you talking about this, it seems like you have done that on your terms. And the result is just so beautiful and tender. And
thank you.
It's just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And Nathaniel, last but hardly least, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's so nice to meet you. It's so nice to meet you all. Listen, this was your first television experience. Was it your first on-camera experience as well?
Yeah. And I'd only done one play before.
You had never ever stood in front of a camera with lights and crew and boom mics and all this stuff and act. And
not properly, no.
No, well, so you were really thrown in the deep end with this.
Yeah,
you were doing the whole thing. But in all seriousness, you did have quite a task for yourself on this. In that you had to learn as you go, and you were asked to do a lot of emotionally dangerous things. You were asked to really make yourself vulnerable. You were you had intimacy of all kinds on this show. And how did you? I would imagine that for any actor, this is with any level of experience, this is a daunting task. And you say, can you just give me maybe 3 lines, and I'll say I'm going to go home, and that'll be my first job, and then I'll know what I'm doing, and then I'll show up, and I'll have 5 lines, and then by the time I'm ready for this, we'll be good. But for you, you did not have that. How did you? What was it like for you to just sort of dive right into the deep end with this thing?
I mean, I think the way that you meet Ash, you kind of have to just go all in, as it were. And it's very. I was incredibly lucky. I would have been proud with whatever my first job is, but to have a show like this, to have Russell's writing, to be able to work with actors who I have loved all my life, and people who I respect so much, has been amazing. And it wasn't, although yes, there were days that were hard, doing scenes that were emotional, or scenes that didn't require a lot of costume, or there were moments that were, there were moments that were quite scary. But I was so lucky with this being my first job, because I love absolutely everyone you see on the screen and everyone that you don't see. It was the amount of love that was on the sets. And I mean, from the read through alone, I sat there and was like, it's okay, I'm home, it's good. And it wasn't hard to pretend to love all these people and to think of them as my friends, because they are my friends. I talk to them all the time, even now. And it's just really, it was just an honor. And like, from the moment I got the script, I knew it was gonna be something amazing. I was a mess. I read the Russell scripts on a train. I was on my way to go and see my family. And I was like biting my lips so I wasn't wailing, like tucked up into the corner of a train. It was awful, so embarrassing, but I'd do it again. So,
well, I mean, that is, it's a great way to start your career, and it's a beautiful. I mean, like I keep saying this to every single one of you, it's a beautiful performance, but it's genuinely held fact that they are beautiful performances. This thing is, it really does sneak up on you. I find sometimes I feel like I'm well fortified. I'll be okay. And I'm good. I'm not gonna cry. Or I'm not gonna carry this into my day with me. And you do. You find, like a novel, you find yourself thinking about the characters when you're not around them. And that is a testament to all of your work as actors, as producers and writers and directors, and it's a thing of beauty. It's a great piece of generosity for the world right now, which we really, really need. And so I thank you all. Speaking of generosity, I thank you all for the time that you've given us today. I'm astonished. I really thought we were running like half an hour behind schedule, and we are perfectly on schedule. Just goes to show what I know about time, which probably shows why I'm always running late. Thank you all so much. I'm going to let the cast go. I'm going to let everybody go, and Kevin and I are going to stay. You're all brilliant. Please stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And I hope that one day, next time I'm in London, I'm going to take you all out to dinner, and Russell's paying.
Okay, that's the deal. Not you, Callum. Not you. Matthew López.
Thank you so much.
This says Matthew López. Hooray!
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Seriously, we are going to have that dinner. And Russell. All right. Thank you all.
Thank
you.
Oh, watch them all pop out one by one.
Thank you.
No.
Brady Bunch in reverse.
No.
Bye, everybody. Are they staying? Oh, they're staying. Oh no, they're gone. Kevin, that was great. I thank you for letting me do this. I want to say to everybody that you can watch It's a Sin. It's available right now to stream on HBO Max. It is well worth your time. It's only 5 episodes, which is the real sin. I wish it was longer. Thank you so much. Shall I throw it over to you now, Kevin?
Yeah, no, thanks, Matthew. Terrific. That was really wonderful. It was so great to hear from them, the cast, and Russell and Nicola and everybody. We were saying earlier about some of the progress that's been made on AIDS research, and what I hope will be sort of a refiring of the research engines around HIV research. If folks want to support that work, they can go to www.amfar.org/event and support the cause. But Matthew, thanks for being such a great host, and thanks to everybody for watching.
It's been such a pleasure. I'm really grateful that you asked me to do this. It was when they asked me if I wanted to do this, I said yes at the subject line.
Well, I'm coming to the dinner in London, just so you know.
You're so welcome to the dinner in London. Russell can afford it. I'm hosting, he's paying. It's only fair.
Great.
Thank you so much.
All right. You take care.
You as well. Bye.